Prophetic Times Off Grid Survival Living. We are so glad that you're here. This show, again, is being sponsored by the Arc of Sustainability. We've seen lately all the mass shootings in the schools and all the things that are going on that are different from 5 years ago. We know that if you have the wisdom and the understanding how to homeschool your child or to get your food preps and things ready, things have really changed in the last few years, and we want to prepare you. So that's what the Arc of Sustainability is all about. We're thankful that you would even take a look at that, and we're thankful that you're here again today at another show of Prophetic Times Off Grid Survival Living. This episode is 8 Law Organic, and our guest today is Charissa Jones. She began her love for gardening in 2017. After watching an online ministry teaching about gardening fundamentals, she immediately went out and purchased her things that she needed from a big box stores like seeds, the dirt, a few pots, and she began her journey learning how to do gardening. And she lives in the high desert of Phoenix, Arizona, where she is teaching urban gardening, also where she's learned all the ins and outs, because when it comes to the heat in Arizona, it is no joke. You have to understand what it means. But the blessing about Phoenix, Arizona is you have 2 gardening cycles. So you get to garden longer, which makes it a lot better for a person that's doing urban gardening in the high desert. I want to thank her for being here. She teaches in her school of No Excuses Gardening Tour. It's an opportunity that you'll get to learn and listen about. We want to thank you, Charissa, for being here with your 8 Laws of Organic, and we just want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much, Sister Rhonda. I'm so excited to be here. And I just look forward to just sharing my story and of how I got here. God is truly faithful.
Awesome. Now, when you look at gardening, you call it urban gardening because it's in the city. There's a lot of things that you've learned and how you've created your online courses or your in-house courses or whatever you're doing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So it all started, I was living in an apartment and I was raising my son, single mother, and something just told me to get a pot and put a watermelon seed in the pot. And in my ignorance, I really thought I was going to get a watermelon from that pot. However, I planted this thing in June, which was the worst time to do that. And my plant promptly died. So I said to myself, well, okay, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'm not supposed to grow anything. And I will never forget, I was listening. It was probably about 2017. There was a ministry called Save to Serve, and they had this whole series called Preparation for the Great Food Crisis. And it was revolutionary for me. And not only did they teach about the fact that there was a food crisis that was coming, but they provided principles from the Bible as well as just hands-on practical teaching, practical ways of learning. And so whatever they said to plant, I ran and grabbed a pot and I put whatever they told me to put in that pot, I did it. And it was amazing because things started to grow. But guess what happened though? It was in May, June, and the Phoenix sun promptly burned up all of my plants. Now, it was hilarious, right? But in the back of my mind, I said, no, God was speaking to me in such a powerful way at that point. And I said, and mind you, I'm probably a little bit more stubborn than most. So I was not going to allow the Phoenix sun to beat me. And I knew that I was supposed to grow food. It was the weirdest thing. And so I started to do research and come to find out through the University of Arizona, there is a plant guide. And I adopted that plant guide as my gardening Bible here in Phoenix. And as I stuck to that chart, I was becoming more and more successful, was learning more and more lessons. I was getting more and more excited about it. But I never forgot that there was a food crisis that was coming. And I began to see more and more recalls happening. And as I would try my food that I was able to grow, it was so delicious that I stopped wanting to even go to the store to buy what they had there. And so it progressed, honestly, Sister Rhonda. It progressed from throwing my whole garden in pots to it expanding to what it has become today. So God has
That,
been really faithful.
that is amazing. And now you're growing in a yard. Is that correct?
Yes, now let's talk about this yard. So for each house that I've lived, because I've moved probably 2 times since I started my gardening journey. I started in a townhouse, and that was where I was sharing the story earlier about everything burning up. And then I was in another home that had a lot of space, but it just wasn't conducive because there was no shade. And
Okay.
so just trying to navigate with that as well as renting. Because, see, that's another thing people have to understand. When you rent property, it's not like you can just go in the backyard and dig up the yard. You have to find really useful ways, beneficial ways of growing food. And so I think that I've mastered it, to be honest with you. Where I'm currently living, I'm renting it.
Okay.
And I know it's way less. It's not even an acre. It's not anything all that serious. But what you have to understand is you don't need a lot of space. If you trust in the Lord and you are diligent and you follow his principles, God will bless your bounty and you will receive a harvest. And so God has blessed our situation to the point to where now I've hosted garden tours where people come in our backyard in our rental property, and God has just been good. He's been so good. We share things out of the garden. When it's time for us to eat, our menu is strictly from my garden. And I should say God's garden, because he's the one that blesses the whole thing. And it's just a testament to everyone that you can do this in the city. It can happen, knowing that we need to get to the country because that's something that really is needed. As crazy as things are right now, in these times that we're living in, there is a need to have a little bit more elbow room. But there are lessons that need to be learned right now, and we can learn them today.
That's awesome. And if somebody is wanting to start a garden, do you recommend them starting it in a pot? I mean, I always recommend, hey, just try a pot. I mean, get your hands in the dirt and nurture something. Try it.
Yes. That's such a good point, Sister Rhonda. And I'm going to tell you a quick little story because I think it's important for people to know. There are lessons along the way when you start this gardening journey. What do I mean by that? When I first, remember I told you the story about the watermelon, right? First lesson I learned, I do not like how dirt feels. It grossed me out so bad. And I kept thinking to myself, how in the world am I going to grow food when I don't even like how dirt feels? But let me tell you about the goodness of God. I bet you today I'll get out there and put my hands in the dirt, no gloves needed. He'll bring you through all of that, right? And
Hmm.
so that's just one of the lessons. Number two, your space does not have to be big. You have to start somewhere. Think about the foods that you like to eat and plant them. But just make sure that you remember one of the other lessons that I learned: timing is everything.
It
So if
is.
you throw those seeds at the wrong time, the result that you're looking for, it won't happen. And one of the other lessons that I learned is never give up. You got to keep going. If you're going to let plants dying cause you to not garden, man, it's going to be rough for you as we deal with all these hard things that are coming to us quickly. So I say, okay, if something dies, I get it. Pull it up and put something else there. So you're not commiserating about the fact that that plant dies. Something else can grow. Keep growing.
Yes. And one of the things that is, I think, is life changing for the seeds itself is to soak the seeds. You get them soaking for 7 or 14 days depending on the seed. Most people just throw a seed in the dirt and they're like, it didn't work. Well,
Right.
there's a way of doing things, and there's an order. And right now I've done a lot of tomato seeds, and I've got watermelon seeds that I sprouted, and I've did corn, and I've got seedlings coming out of my eyeballs right now because
Yes.
I've taken the time to nurture and love and to be patient and to let them do their thing as God provides for this, in order to be able to put it into, it starts out something small, and you got to get a bigger pot and a bigger pot and a bigger pot from what I'm doing, because I'm doing mass gardening. But,
Yes.
you just put it in a big pot and let it do its thing, it'll do that too. And the other thing I think is really important is people need to realize that they can get their onion and chop that root off and put that root in the dirt, or celery or lettuce. I mean, all of that stuff is at everyone's like fingertips to have a plant already started, to stick it in and let it start growing.
Absolutely. And not only that, but guess what? One of the biggest lessons that you're learning is patience, right?
Yeah.
You have to learn that. Like, it's not going to be a microwave, genie in a bottle situation. That is not what gardening is. And not only is it teaching you patience, but it's teaching you problem solving.
Yes.
So at each address that I, during my gardening journey, and mind there's been 3. What God has been showing me is you've got to account for pests. You've got to account for animals who want the food that you're growing, because it's not just about you. The animals want to eat as well. And so it's about weeds. It's about all these different things that take place and what happens in the garden. And it's also about, are you going to rely on commercial fertilizers? Or are you going to allow God to teach you the way to feed your garden without using all of that stuff? Because you're not always going to be able to get it. So
That's
what
right.
would you do if you relied on all of that to make your garden big and beautiful, and now you have no access to it? So all of these things. And so where I'm living now, okay, I'm going to run this down for you. Some of the things that I've dealt with.
Okay.
Feral cats. What do you do?
Oh.
Any insect that I can think of has shown up in my garden. Whereas at the other 2 places, I didn't have to deal with aphids or anything like that. But once I moved to my current location, aphids, the cabbage worm, all these weird looking bugs, right? I'm going rushing to buy ladybugs. And finally, I just said, Lord, please just send me ladybugs. And so God started sending me ladybugs to help me. Not to mention, it gets deeper than that, because rats have shown up.
Oh.
So how in the world do you deal with that? Now, mind you, I'm a scary person normally, right? So I'm a city girl. So seeing something crazy like that outside in my garden, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten weak in the knees. But let me tell you, I bet you I have a garden out there right now. That's not going to stop me. That is
Right.
not stopping me. And it just makes me trust the Lord, because what he's trying to do is prepare me for where he's about to take me. I may be in the city right now. I may be learning lessons right now, but I don't plan on being there for very much longer. And God be my helper, I may have to deal with bigger animals. God forbid something else shows up, then what am I going to do? So I have to get used to this stuff. These are all lessons. They're so valuable, and you can't trade it for anything. It just
No.
makes sense to start now.
Yes. I think you're right on track. It's grow where you are.
Yes.
It's a great, great thing. And, I live up on the mountains, so we've dealt with the cold temperatures. It's been trial and error this year, trying to figure out how to heat and what to do. And, we get aphids and this and that, and what detours this or that. And it's a learning process. And as we learn, we can teach other people, which is what you're doing. and giving that information to somebody else is like gold. They don't know how great that is. It's really golden. And I'm glad that
Absolutely.
you're doing your No Excuses garden tour. How's that going for you?
So far, so good. We've had several sessions where people from the community have been able to come where I'm sharing with them. I have a garden out front where literally there was a big planter with a palm tree in it. And I just kept staring at it. And I was like, Lord, I really want to plant in this thing, but I don't necessarily want people coming in my yard, to potentially take the food out of there. But I definitely want to do something. And God told me to plant, and it has been such a witnessing focal point for the actual neighborhood that I live in. People stop by all the time asking me about that. And so when people come to the garden tour, that's the first place that we start. We talk about that. And then I take them to my backyard where we have 12 garden beds, varying in sizes. The very first one that was built was an 8x8, and I did it by myself. I was determined to try to figure out how to do that. But I learned some lessons. An 8x8 is not very practical when it comes to grabbing and harvesting and weeding.
Mhm.
It should be a 4x8. But at the moment when I did it, I had just gotten into a bad car accident, and I was just sitting here trying to figure out what to do with myself. And God said, build. And so I just got started, and that's what he led me to do. And so that's the very first bed. We tell the story about what happened, why it got created, and then we go to the other 9 beds. And we also go to the 2, makeshift greenhouses that we have. They're not commercial size, but listen, you all, you do what you can, where you can, with what you have, and God will bless it. And so that's what we do. We just share with them the principles, and then we sit down and have a conversation, because you do need to know about soil. You
Mhm.
do need to know about composting. You do need to know about the plant schedule. And also, you need to know about the 8 laws of health. And so I make sure that I throw all that in. And God has blessed me to be able to share the 8 gardening laws too, that He's taught me over this time. And so it just winds up being a really good time for everybody. I want as many people to know about how to grow as possible. So, however we can do it.
That's great. So for getting someone started with you, how do they um, connect with you?
So one of the first places that you can reach us is 8 Law Organics on Facebook. We do have an official page where you'll be able to go, and you'll be able to also contact us. There is a place for you to send instant messages. You can also reach out to me through our Gmail account that we have, which is 8laworganics@gmail.com, and I will promptly get back in contact with you.
And how many people can you take in your class at a time?
The most that we had was 45. And so, but we have plenty of space. We can absolutely make it happen. The
And
way that our yard is configured, we can make it work.
okay, all right. And tell me, when is your next class going to start?
So that's a good question. What I want to do is have it before the heat really arrives. So depending on feedback, it will more than likely happen no later than May of this year.
Awesome. You know, the money is getting ready to change in this United States, and they're getting ready. They say July is when the digital currency will come on the platform. And I just really encourage people to get their seeds and get their
Yes.
pots and get their soil and get your shovel, your spade, or whatever you need to get now, because things are getting ready to just kind of change a little bit. And as we want to be more sustainable in everything that we're doing, gardening is like the first thing of defense. Here we are trying to figure
Absolutely.
out with the food shortages going on and all these different things. And, medicinal plants are great things to have in your garden, or edible weeds in another place, so that, you for sure have something kind of nutrition, because with all the shortages and all the things that are going crazy throughout the global, not just in our town or in your town or whatever, it's a global situation. Gardening is probably our first line of defense, getting things ready. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And I would dare to say, in your preparation, be very vigilant about your water.
Mhm.
How will you store water? I believe that now is the time for you to get that system in place, to have backups upon backups, because something as simple as a train derailment can change the whole focus of what happens with your water. I
It's
would
true.
also encourage people to really focus on food preservation. Once you grow all of this, you do need to know how to store it. And it does not need to be connected to the grid. It needs to be in a way that is sustainable and long lasting. So, if there are ways for you to learn how to can, to dehydrate, to freeze dry, the Arc of Sustainability is about to have a huge class that's going to be vital for all of us, that will teach those principles. We need to learn it. And if all else fails, don't forget, there's YouTube University. You've got to try. We just can't sit here and let everything happen.
I agree. Thank you for that. Well, we are so appreciative of you being on our show. Is there any last words you'd like to give to our viewers?
Yes, here's my parting words for you. Remember, there are 8 laws of health. There's nutrition, there's exercise, there's water, there's sunshine, there's temperance, air, and rest, and trusting in God. All of those principles can be manifested in the garden. You have nature, you'll be outside. It's a natural environment. It's empowering to grow your own food. You know where it's coming from. It's work. So don't think you're just throwing seeds out there and then walking away. There's work involved, okay? It's sustainable. This will sustain you. It is traceable or trackable. I don't have to worry about food recalls because I'm going right out in my backyard and I'm getting my food and I know where it came from. It's accessible. It's easy for me to go out back and get my food. It's rewarding. Can you imagine how good a pot of greens would be from your garden? And what amazing testimonies will come. I can't tell you, Sister Rhonda, how many times people have shared Facebook posts saying, Charissa, I'm just grateful to God that He's blessing my garden. And I agree, because, man, this is a freeing movement. So come on, you all. We all need to do this. I'm here for it.
Thank you so much. That was so awesome. So thank you, viewers, for being here. Thank you, Clarissa, for giving us all this information. Remember, God will sustain your garden. All you have to do is start, and starting somewhere. Thank you for being on our show.
Anytime.